Off America's Pacific coast, a massive fault zone hasn't fully ruptured for over 300 years. And the terrifying part is, that quiet doesn't mean safety, it means pressure. When Cascadia finally ruptures, the shaking could last for minutes, not seconds, minutes, long enough to damage roads, bridges, ports, and the very systems built to protect us. Then comes the part most people don't picture. Parts of the coast could suddenly sink, the ocean could push inland, and a modern region could find out how fragile it really is. This isn't just a future scenario. In 1700, Cascadia ruptured, an earthquake estimated around magnitude 9, powerful enough to send a tsunami across the Pacific. Japan recorded the wave, and along the coast, dead forests marked where the land had suddenly dropped. The proof is still there. Today, that same boundary is locked again. Beneath cold water, the fault is storing pressure again. A locked fault doesn't release energy, it stores it quietly, year after year, century after century. This disaster doesn't begin when people start running. It begins much earlier, in darkness under the Pacific. Then the lock breaks. Deep offshore, the fault slips across hundreds of miles, releasing centuries of stored pressure at once. On land, it starts without warning, a hard jolt, then another, and it doesn't stop, because the shaking keeps going. Traffic lights swing, glass starts falling, even standing becomes a problem. Higher up, it gets worse. Upper floors sway longer, harder, and the building people work in every day suddenly feels like something they can't trust. The real damage doesn't come from one violent hit. It comes from minute after minute of motion, long enough for structures to weaken and for panic to turn into survival. By the time the shaking finally starts to ease, the region isn't relieved. It's exposed, and the roads are about to become the next problem. After the shaking, the next crisis isn't the ground moving, it's movement. People trying to get through a region that no longer works the way it did. Bridges become choke points. One damaged crossing can separate neighborhoods, slow ambulances, and turn a short drive into an impossible route. Further inland, landslides can cut roads that already had only one way in and one way out. Rescue crews may know exactly where help is needed, but the overpasses are cracked, the ramps are blocked, and the fuel routes aren't guaranteed. This is when a disaster stops being one moment. It becomes a map of blocked exits, stranded towns, and people waiting for a system that can't reach them. And roads can't solve what comes next. In some places, the coast itself drops, and the ocean doesn't wait. But a Cascadia quake doesn't just shake the coast. In some places, it can lower it in minutes in a way people can't quickly undo. Streets that once sat above the waterline can end up much closer to it. Not destroyed, just changed enough to become dangerous. Harbors feel it fast. Docks sit wrong. Boat lines tighten, and the edge between land and ocean stops feeling stable. Then the problem reaches everything the region needs to recover. Power, water, sanitation, access roads, all of it sitting closer to the floodline. And then the warning arrives. The ocean pulls back. For a moment, the coast goes quiet. Then the wave begins. The ocean pulling back isn't relief, it's the warning. The shoreline goes wrong, and anyone who recognizes it has very little time. Even when people understand the danger, the roads out are already filling. Every moment spent hesitating is distance lost. Then the wave finally appears, not as a clean wall of water, but as something wider, darker, and bearing down on the town. It doesn't stay at the beach. It pushes through streets, through channels, through low neighborhoods, turning the coast into current. From high ground, people see the full scale. This isn't one bad wave. It's an entire town being overtaken below. Once that surge reaches critical systems, the disaster shifts again. No longer about impact. Now it's about what can still function and what can't. The surge moves through, but the region isn't resting. Power, water, roads, all starting to fail together. The wave may be gone, but the danger isn't. Now survival depends on systems that were never designed to fail at once. Hospitals can keep running, but only if backup power holds. And when the grid starts breaking, that window closes fast. Then water becomes its own emergency. Not the water that came in, the clean water people need next, and the systems that keep a city livable. Fuel becomes the next pressure point. Cars line up, people wait, and every break in supply makes movement harder. At home, the disaster gets quieter. No reliable power, no certainty about water, no guarantee of signal, just the slow realization that nothing works the way it did. When enough systems fail at once, the problem stops being local. It becomes regional, and the consequences start moving far beyond the coast. The disaster doesn't stay at the shoreline, because the coast doesn't just hold homes, it holds gateways. Once the ports slow down, the disruption moves inland, through trucks, through rail, through every handoff the system depends on. And that's when the scale gets harder to contain. This isn't just damage at the edge of the ocean. It's a regional system starting to fail from the inside. Cascadia isn't a surprise. The threat is documented. The timing is unknown, but the event itself is not. Plans exist, shelters open, volunteers show up, but when enough people need help at the same time, preparedness can fall short of the crisis. Support doesn't fail because no one tries. It fails because roads, fuel, communication, and time can all break together. And that's the uncomfortable truth. Knowing the danger is not the same as being ready for the days after. When the shaking stops, the disaster doesn't end. For Cascadia, the test begins after the impact, when the region has to keep itself alive. The Pacific can look calm again. The fault can go quiet again. But quiet is not the same as safe. Not here. The question isn't whether Cascadia will rupture. It's whether a modern region, with all its systems, is ready for the days that follow.